So I was mentioning that today we will read the entire Bhagavad Gita. Does anyone know why we will today read the entire Gita?
Yes, Prabhu, the Chaturshloki, my favorite, the essence.
Yes. Today we will read the Chaturshloki Bhagavad Gita, which is the entire Bhagavad Gita. And therefore, in some ways, this is the most important, most wonderful chapter in the Gita, because the entire Gita is in this chapter. So Krishna actually begins this chapter with this very verse. So chapter 9, we said, was the most confidential knowledge. So Krishna said, this is the most confidential knowledge. There's no knowledge that is more confidential to this. But now in text 1 of chapter 10, Krishna is saying, the Supreme Personality of God had said, listen again, O mighty armed Arjuna, because you are my dear friend. For your benefit, I will speak to you further, giving knowledge that is better than what I have already explained. So one quick thing, actually, two quick things. That today I need to end at my time 12 o'clock, so we will end in 2 hours, because it's a very auspicious day. My mother is getting the vaccine. It's the COVID vaccine, so the appointment is at 12:50, so I have to end in 2 hours. And then also the other thing that I want to say is that many of these slides, the images and things, are the generosity of Mother Urmila. So I just want to give her the credit for this. So some of these paintings that you see and things are from her slides. So these 2 points. So please, because we will end in 2 hours, please give your full attention, because we'll go through this material at a very good pace. And then I also want to save time for questions at the end. So we'll have about half an hour, 45 minutes at the end for questions. So the lecture itself will be about an hour, 20 minutes. And so please give your full attention. Again, there's very important points in this chapter, so you don't want to miss it. It's very important. So Krishna text 1 is saying,
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So can I humbly request that we do not take any questions in the middle today, so that we can continue the whole chapter. Otherwise, the chapter will be a little bit, it won't be complete. So can I just humbly request that we
that's a very good idea. Yes, that's a very good suggestion. I may ask for a little discussion on certain points, but our goal is to finish the entire chapter, like you're saying.
Yes,
so,
Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Actually, that's a good point. So Krishna here is saying, listen again, O mighty armed Arjuna, because you are my dear friend. For your benefit, I shall speak to you further, giving knowledge that is better than what I have already explained. So in chapter 9, Krishna said that's the highest knowledge, the most confidential knowledge. And now he's saying that this is even better. So what was the knowledge of chapter 9? What was that confidential knowledge, which was the most confidential that we understood, which now Krishna's might be saying, that he's saying is going to be better. But we don't know that right now. We haven't done chapter 10. But in chapter 9, what was that knowledge that was most confidential?
The Bhakti Yoga is the highest, and you can Krishna is known he's very easily by Bhakti Yoga, and the confidential pastimes of the Lord in the spiritual world. So that is
Yes.
That is nice chapter.
Okay, very nice. So bhakti is established as the highest process, and devotion to the Lord is established as the greatest message, the highest message. That's very good. That's the correct answer. But more specific, what in bhakti did Krishna emphasize in chapter 9? So bhakti is there, but what was it?
Bhakti with
Particularly.
jnana.
That's always there. I mean, that's emphasized throughout, but specifically in chapter 9, he's emphasized, yes, he also emphasizes transcendental knowledge,
Devotional service.
devotional service. And
Krishna
what's the
mentions
highest way, the highest level of
Ananya's
devotion? Yes, Prabhu. Sorry, go ahead.
mentioned the Ananya's Chintayanto Mam. So
Mhm.
without any deviation, fully focused only on Krishna.
Ananyas chintayanto mam. So what does chintayanta mean?
A remembrance, constant remembrance of the Lord.
Yes, constant remembrance of the Lord. So, and Krishna does this in chapter 12 also. Krishna has described that bhakti is the highest, and within bhakti, Krishna is saying that the highest process, the most, the culmination of bhakti, the topmost step in the ladder of devotion is remembering the Lord, remembrance of the Lord. In chapter 12, Krishna also says, just remember me always. And then he says, if you cannot do this, then do this. If you cannot do this, then do this. And then he says, if you cannot remember me, then perform the regulated principles of bhakti. So Prabhupada there explains that the regulated principles of bhakti are meant to help us remember Krishna. The purpose of those, all the rules and regulations that we do is to remember Krishna. That is the most confidential knowledge. That is the highest stage of bhakti. The one who is a pure devotee is someone who is always remembering Krishna. Because if a person is actually always remembering Krishna, then they can only serve Krishna. Right? If you're only remembering Krishna, then you'll be only serving Krishna, because if you're serving someone else, then you won't remember Krishna. So fixing the mind on the Lord, chintayanto, like ananyas chintayanto mam, that verse is the essence, like Gopal Prabhu, you said. That is the most confidential knowledge. That is the highest thing. Always remember Krishna. Now, in this chapter, the title of the chapter is Opulence of the Absolute Truth, Vibhuti Yoga. This chapter is about the Lord's opulences. As all of you who are generally acquainted with the Gita know, there's a lot of description here about Krishna's opulences, Krishna's greatness. So why is this knowledge even better than the previous knowledge? Because now in this chapter, Krishna is explaining how we can remember him always. Right? So in the previous chapter, Krishna said the highest process is remembering him always. Now he's saying, this is how you can remember me always. These are the ways in which you can meditate upon me. So it's actually part of that same knowledge. That's why I was mentioning that, in the spiritual life, there's best, and there's everything is best, even though, because it's all just parts of those best. It's the best knowledge. So here, the link to the previous chapter, having established that the supreme yoga, bhakti, is practiced by constant remembrance of him. In this chapter, Krishna will teach us how to remember him when we see opulent, beautiful, and powerful things within this world. So it's very scientific. And you see, the message of the Gita is very clear. Remember Krishna always, and then when we see beautiful things in this world, which we all have a desire to see, we all go to Alaska and India and all these different places, then we want to see beautiful things. We want to see the beautiful mountains. So when we see those things, how can we remember Krishna? So in this first verse, the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, this is very important for preaching and for our own understanding, but very useful in preaching. The word Bhagavan, which is the title of Krishna, is explained thus by Parashar Muni. One who is full in 6 opulences, who has full strength, full fame, wealth, knowledge, beauty, and renunciation, is Bhagavan, or the personality of Godhead. So, the Vedic scriptures give a definition of who is God, what is God. And the definition that they gave is that the person who possesses 6 qualities in full, that person is Bhagavan or God. Now, why is this a very wonderful, important thing to know, especially in preaching? Because, like Plato said, this is like a definition of God, an argument for God. Plato said that everyone believes in God. Why? Because whatever you think is the most beautiful thing in this world, that is beauty itself, that is God. So I may call it God, you may call it the most beautiful. Whatever is truth in this world, that is God. Whatever is, the best in this world, that is God. That is the very definition of God. And so everyone has a conception of the best, and that best is none other than God. And because in this world, the best thing that we find in this world is people, are persons, right? We may be on a perfect island, in a palace, in the perfect country, next to the ocean. But if there's no people there, that will be a prison, not a kingdom. In previous times, the prisoners, the way they would punish them is not put them in a prison. It costs money to run a prison. They would just take them on a boat and put them on an island. And the prisoners would have the whole island to themselves. Right? Some people say that, this is partly how, the people, there were indigenous people there, but that's how some people of Australia came there. They were the prisoners of the British, and they would dump them in Australia. So you have a whole island to yourself, but it was a prison. Why? Because there were no other people there. You're removed from civilization, from your family. So the most wonderful thing in this world that we find are persons. And therefore, if God is the most wonderful thing, God must be a person. God must be the best person. Because our reality in this world is personal. So the first thing is that he is Bhagavan. He is a person. And then in this world, Srila Prabhupada says, if we look around, we see so many wealthy people. And now especially, we see so many wealthy people, right? The CEO of Amazon, the CEO of Tesla, all these wealthy people are there. And they have so much wealth in this world. But even though they have so much wealth, they don't have all the wealth in this world. Similarly, you find these opulences exist in all of us also, right? Because we are part and parcel of Krishna, like we discussed last time, they exist in us also. You find beautiful people in this world also. So many beautiful, Miss World and Mr. Worlds. They have so much beauty, but they don't have all the beauty in this world. Then another opulence that is very attractive is knowledge. You find so many intelligent people in this world. Just like, Albert Einstein. He was not the most beautiful person. His hair was always but he was one of the most intelligent people in this world. So therefore, because of his intelligence, he was very attractive. These are the qualities that make people attractive in this world. That's why we search for people who have them. Similarly, you find people who are very strong. And you find people who are very famous. Just because they're famous, they are attractive. You see them, they don't have any exceptional qualities, but they're very famous because they're famous. They're very attractive because they're famous. So these 6 qualities. And then finally, you find people who are very renounced. And renounced persons are also very attractive. So we have to be careful that it's an opulence that we are not attracted by this material opulence of renunciation, or we are not desiring this opulence of renunciation, which is still a material opulence, unless it is engaged in the service of the Lord. So these 6 qualities exist in everyone. Now, if you were to find someone who has all the wealth, all the strength, all the beauty, all the knowledge, and all the renunciation in this world, that person would be God, Bhagavan. So someone who is all the wealth, that person is God. And therefore, that is the definition of Krishna. Krishna has all of these things in full. So many people ask, when you say, do you believe in God? Then they say, what do you mean by God? This is what we mean by God. Someone who has all these qualities, they have it in full. That is Krishna. So if Krishna is this, if this is the definition of Krishna, then we are, obliged to know that then what are the opulences of Krishna? In what ways does he have all these things in full? So very wonderful point here. Another point I want to emphasize is that Krishna here is telling Arjuna again, he's saying that I am telling you this knowledge because you are my very dear friend. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport also, in addition to making this point, he makes the point that one must be a friend of the Lord. One must be a devotee of the Lord in order to get this knowledge. So this is the structure of this chapter. The first verse, Krishna is saying, listen and hear of my opulences. From verses 2 to 7, Krishna emphasizes something that he has already said in chapter 9, touched on it. Krishna says that he is the origin of everything. He's the origin of the spiritual and material worlds. He's the origin of the qualities of people in this world. And we'll discuss that at length. Then in text 8 to 11, that is the Bhagavad Gita, the Chaturshloki Gita. Then text 12 to 18, Arjuna acknowledges Krishna as God and wants to see him in the world. So this is the proof that text 8 to 11 is Chaturshloki Gita, because after hearing it, Krishna is convinced. Arjuna is convinced that Krishna is God. After hearing those verses, Arjuna wants to surrender. So the Gita actually, the message of the Gita is complete and Arjuna's doubts have been dispelled. Everything after text 11 of chapter 10 is, as they say, further clarifications. The rest of the Gita is further clarifying, illuminating the knowledge that Arjuna already has, and it's just further clarifying. But Arjuna is convinced now, after text 11, that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, and he says this very clearly, as we will see. In some ways, the Gita ends here. Everything else is footnotes. But it's still Gita. It's Krishna's Gita. It's equally there. But the point being that Arjuna is fully convinced by this time. And then text 19 to 42 is the opulence of the Absolute. This is the section which is the main part of the chapter in which Krishna describes all of his opulences and allows us to remember him by seeing the world and seeing nature. So very nice chapter, very clear structure. This is the structure of this chapter. So I mentioned to you how, I mentioned to you how the text 2 to 7 describes Krishna as the origin of everything. So he describes how he's the origin of the spiritual and material worlds. And then we find in almost every chapter of the Gita, Krishna describes the qualities. And mostly he describes the qualities of a great person. And the fact that he repeats this so many times tells us something. It tells us how Krishna really wants us to develop good qualities. Again and again we see it. We saw it in chapter 7, we saw it in chapter 9, we'll see it in chapter 18. It's all throughout the Gita. So here in text 4 to 5, he's telling that all these qualities, good or bad, are coming from him. They come from Krishna. And these are the qualities that he mentions: intelligence, knowledge, freedom from doubt and delusion, forgiveness, truthfulness, and so on and so forth. So we should take these qualities very seriously. So Prabhupada, in the purports, I'm just giving you the kind of the definitions, how Srila Prabhupada describes what these qualities are, and some, you could say, notable points. Because this chapter, the philosophy of this chapter is actually quite simple relative to other chapters. It's not a very philosophically dense chapter, but chapter 10 is, later on Krishna describes, the things that he's present in the world, places that he's present in the world. In this chapter, Krishna is not telling us such dense philosophy, but he's showing us the essence of things, just giving us like the most valuable points. And Srila Prabhupada also in his purport is doing that. So, for example, in terms of intelligence, Srila Prabhupada says intelligent refers to the power to analyze things in their proper perspective. So this means to know things as they are. That is intelligence. Analyze things in their proper perspective. The reason why I mention this, because intelligence does not mean knowing the answer to all the questions. Meaning an intelligent person may not know why things are the way they are. Why is Krishna God? Why is Krishna blue? Why do we have 2 arms rather than 3 arms? Why are there the sun and the moon? Why not just the sun? Why is the sky blue? Why isn't it green? Why are there 8,400,000 species? Because the fact is, there are no answers to these questions in any philosophy, in any tradition, even to the atheists. Why are there so many species in this world? No one knows. Why did the world have to start with a big bang? Even the atheists cannot understand that. So our acharyas have said, if we keep asking these questions, we will become frustrated, and we may even become an atheist, or we may become just confused, because there aren't, things are the way they are since time immemorial. Because Vedic philosophy tells us that the universe is eternal, we are eternal, and Krishna is eternal. Everything is beginningless. So things are the way they are. There's no answer to these questions. Why is the sky blue? It is blue because it is blue. It could have been green. The color of Lord Ramachandra is green, so it could have been green. It could have been black. It could be any color, but it's blue because it's just the way it is. So then what is knowledge and what is intelligence? Knowledge and intelligence means understanding the way that things are. So not misunderstanding things. Why are we the soul? Well, there's no answer to that. But understanding that we are not the body, but we are the soul, that is intelligence. That is intelligence. Why there are 2 arms and not 3 arms? We don't have an answer to that. But understanding that the purpose of these arms is to use it in Krishna's service, and this is the energy of Krishna, that is intelligence. So intelligent refers to the power to analyze things in their proper perspective. Knowledge refers to understanding what is spirit and what is matter. So seeing things as they are. Asamoha, freedom from doubt and delusion, can be achieved when one is not hesitant and when he understands the transcendental philosophy. Slowly but surely, he becomes free from bewilderment. And then Prabhupada here makes this very beautiful point, very amazing point. Nothing should be accepted blindly. Everything should be accepted with care and with caution. So although Srila Prabhupada is telling us to accept the philosophy of the Gita, in so many places he's saying that, but he's saying that nothing should be accepted blindly. We are not we do not believe in blind following. In chapter 4 in the Gita, again Prabhupada has confirmed this point. Blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. In fact, this is the material problem. It is not, people say, oh, faith means just blind faith. Being a lover of God means you just accepted things blindly. But in fact, the material consciousness is one of blind faith. It's the slaughterhouse mentality. Prabhupada describes it. The cows and the animals, they're in the slaughterhouse and they just follow one another into the slaughterhouse. Same thing in material life. We just accept everything the way others are doing it. And not seeing that it's just leading everyone into a ditch. Blind following the blind, they all fall in a ditch. So the devotee is actually very intelligent. The devotee analyzes everything, understands the true essence of everything, and therefore does not engage, like Krishna said in chapter 9, does not engage in the sources of misery. He sees this thing brings people misery. So I will not engage in that activity. It's a very important point. Nothing should be accepted blindly. In one place, Srila Prabhupada tells his disciples, he says, don't even have faith in me. I may cheat you. He says, have faith in Krishna. And because I'm repeating what Krishna is saying, therefore you can have faith in me. But the point being that Prabhupada said that we should never follow any guru, any teacher blindly. And this is the disease in most spiritual organizations, that people are not thinking, they're not analyzing, studying things carefully. But then we should also not be, Krishna says, tad vidhi pranipatina pariprashnena sevaya. We should not also be arrogant. We should have, like when I go to school, when I'm attending school, once I have accepted a teacher, then I have to listen to them, allow them, give them the time to explain things before dismissing them, before rejecting them. So at the same time, the devotee is very patient and respectful, but is not accepting anything on faith, on blind faith. Another quality Prabhupada describes is a very long purport. Prabhupada goes into detail on these qualities, even though he doesn't need to. So therefore, he has a very important message to give. He says, Kshama, tolerance and forgiveness should be practiced. One should be tolerant and excuse the minor offenses of others. We cannot practice Krishna consciousness peacefully unless we are tolerant and forgiving, because our heart will always be full of anger, of distress. Therefore, the devotee forgives and forgets, right? Forgives and forgets. So kshama, tolerance and forgiveness, is a great quality of a devotee. And we may say, well, to what degree, how much? So Prabhupada explains this. He says that when Vasudeva and Devaki, they are the parents of Krishna. And why were they the parents of Krishna, Vasudeva and Devaki? Because they had this quality of forgiveness to the highest degree. When Kansa, killed the first 7 children of Devaki, then he smashed the children against the rocks, and he killed them. Then after that, then a great voice from the sky made a sound and told Kansa that, oh fool, none of these children were going to be the cause of your death. The cause of your death is born somewhere else. And you are, terrorizing Vasudeva and Devaki for no reason. Because the cause of your death is born somewhere else. They have, it's not even close to them, not even near them. So Kansa, at that point, as evil as he is, he has a moment of goodness. And at that point, he feels bad for having killed the children of his sister Devaki. So at that moment, he begs forgiveness from Vasudeva and Devaki. He says, I'm sorry, I was misled by the previous voice in the sky, and I thought your children will be the cause of my death. And so I'm sorry for this. And it's described that when he asked for forgiveness, then Vasudeva and Devaki, whatever, bad thought they had, whatever, ill feeling they had towards Kansa, they immediately gave it up because he had asked for forgiveness. And so therefore they excused his offenses. Of course, we cannot imitate their example. They are the parents of God. Their example is actually very difficult to understand. A similar type of behavior is shown by the Pandavas when Draupadi forgives Ashwatthama. And again, it's very mind-boggling, something I've been trying to understand, but we cannot understand it with material senses, that how they can be so forgiving. But that is the quality of a great devotee. That is what we have to aspire towards. And in our own ways, with our small tests, we can practice this quality. It's a very important quality to try to develop. And we cannot come to the level of Vasudeva and Devaki or the Pandavas, but we can do it in our day-to-day exchanges with the devotees and with our family and with our community. Satyam, truthfulness, means that facts should be presented as they are. And then Prabhupada says, for the benefit of others. So the very definition of truthfulness is presenting facts as they are and for the benefit of others. That is truthfulness. Very interesting that Prabhupada defines truthfulness like this. He could have just said facts as they are, that's truthfulness. But no, one also has to think what will be the result of my speaking the truth. So we have that famous story of the sage where a man was being chased by 5 robbers, and this man ran into the hermitage of the sage and hid there. And then these 5 robbers came in and they asked the sage, and the sage had taken a vow of truthfulness. And they asked the sage, is this person hiding in the hermitage? And where is he hiding? And the sage, because he had taken a vow of truthfulness, said, yes, he's hiding, and he's hiding there. And because of that, the robbers found him and they killed him. After that, the sage had to go to hell for some time, even though he spoke the truth. Why? Because he spoke the truth, but it was not for the benefit of others. It hurt that person. If he had said no, they're not here, then he would have saved the life of that. So Krishna says in the Gita that austerities of the words is to speak words that are palatable. So we must speak the truth, and we must also speak it in a palatable way. We must also speak it in a way that is as palatable as possible. Prabhupada himself said that in speaking the truth, I had to make many people unhappy. So the devotees sometimes will make others unhappy by speaking the truth, is obliged to, but not unnecessarily. We don't have to tell someone that they are not good looking, even if that's true. The devotee speaks for the benefit of others. Control of the senses means that the senses should not be used for unnecessarily personal enjoyment. There is no prohibition against meeting the proper needs of the senses, but unnecessary sense enjoyment is detrimental for spiritual advancement. Right? So another quality was control of the senses. Prabhupada is saying so nicely here that one can fulfill the needs of the senses, but not unnecessary enjoyment. For example, we should not, buy a house that is $1 million house. We should live in a nice house, a decent house, but then we should make a $1 million temple for the Lord. So one has to fulfill their needs, but more than the needs, once they're fulfilled, then one has to engage one's senses in the service of the Lord. Prabhupada says in one place that it is the nature of human beings to construct very big and beautiful buildings. That is part of our nature. It's the nature of human nature to want to build things. So he says to fulfill that nature, we should build a beautiful temple for the Lord. So that is the perfection of that sense. One should restrain the mind from unnecessary thoughts. That is called shama. Sama. Sorry, this is I think wrong here. This should be, I put that wrong. One should not spend one's time pondering over earning money. That is a misuse of the thinking power. The mind should be used to understand the prime necessity of human beings, and that should be presented authoritatively. The power of thought should be developed in association with persons who are authorities in the scriptures, saintly persons and spiritual masters, and those whose thinking is highly developed. Right? So one's thinking should be highly developed, one's mind should be utilized. One's mind should be utilized in high thinking, in spiritual matters, not in simply the pursuit of the material necessities of life. I really like this image. This is so wonderful. This is this is the material consciousness, right? So we only have so much time and we have so much thinking power. But Prabhupada here is saying that it's a misuse of thinking power to think about material advancement. Rather, he said simple living and high thinking. Same idea. We must live simply and we must think very highly. But if it's our nature, our varna, to be a businessman and earn money, then that can also be high thinking. If we are continuously thinking and making plans on how we can spread the Krishna consciousness movement, you see? So that is also the correct utilization of one's thinking power. A devotee can think all day about money uh, for the service of the Lord, on how to engage it in the service of the Lord. Sukham, pleasure, or happiness should always be in that which is favorable for the cultivation of spiritual consciousness, of Krishna consciousness. So, um, so whatever brings uh, Krishna consciousness, that should be our happiness. That should be so nicely Prabhupada here is saying, Sukham, pleasure, happiness should always be cultivated in that which is favorable for Krishna. So we have the nature to, sing and dance. So we do it in kirtan. So that happiness is cultivated in relationship with Krishna. Then this is one is very interesting, very nice. Fear is due to worrying about the future. A person in Krishna consciousness has no fear because by his activities, he is sure to go back to the spiritual sky, back home, back to Godhead. So Krishna is the source of the quality of fear also. But what is this cause of this quality of fear is the uncertainty of the future, right? People are always wondering, and therefore we should not cultivate things that cause us fear about the future. People are always worried about the stock market. Will I lose all my money? Will the market crash? Will I lose my job? Will I, have a proper place to live? Will the world come to an end? And day and night, we're worried about these things. It's actually, this is our cause of fear because we're always worried about the future, the uncertainty. This world is so uncertain, the uncertainty of the future. And the Krishna consciousness person has no fear because he knows that Krishna is taking care of him. And his activities are not based on the material situation. Their activities are based upon how to go back home, back to Godhead. They're in relationship with the eternal, dependable spiritual world. And so therefore there's no fear. And this is the way how we can reduce our fear, is by focusing on these spiritual activities and depending upon Krishna, because the devotee knows that Krishna takes care of all of his necessities. Yoga kshemam vahamyaham. I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. So that means the only need, the only shortage that we have is the shortage of Krishna consciousness. Because if we are Krishna conscious, then Krishna will take care of all of our needs and we have nothing to be afraid of. Ahimsa, non-violence, means that one should not do anything which will put others into misery or confusion. So this is the definition of non-violence. Non-violence doesn't just mean not attacking someone with a sword or a gun. But non-violence means not putting anyone else into misery. So we can give others emotional misery and be very violent, right? We can give others financial misery and be very violent. We can give people misery by by so many ways that are not just clearly violent. So Prabhupada's definition here is so complete. I mean, so this is, you see that Prabhupada is such a genius. The way he describes these things, even great philosophers look for definitions like this. What is non-violence? Non-violence means not putting others into misery. That is the definition. Samatha, equanimity, refers to freedom from attachment and aversion. A person in Krishna consciousness has nothing to reject and nothing to accept save in terms of its usefulness in the prosecution of Krishna consciousness. So, the devotee's vision, the way the devotee judges things, is based upon what is favorable for my Krishna consciousness and what is unfavorable. Otherwise, everything's equal to the devotee. Good and bad, heat and cold, light and dark, it's all the same. The only difference is if something is doesn't allow him to remember Krishna, then one has to reject it. If something helps him to remember Krishna, that has to be accepted. So this is especially true about our association. The devotee sees everyone equally. The devotee is equal to all beings. However, the devotee rejects the association that leads or that draws that devotee away from Krishna and accepts association that brings the devotee closer to Krishna. And one has to do what is best for one's Krishna consciousness in all circumstances, all the while trying to help others as well. Tushti, one should be satisfied with whatever is obtained by the grace of the Supreme Lord. That is called satisfaction. So here there's an image of Sudama Brahmana. He was satisfied with whatever he had and whatever is attained by the grace of the Lord. So he was very satisfied when he had just a bag of broken rice. And he was also very satisfied when he went back home and Krishna turned his home into a palace. Because that was the grace of the Lord. And he accepted whatever grace the Lord gave and engaged it fully in the Lord's service. Tapas means austerity or penance, rising early in the morning, fasting as prescribed by the scriptures. These are different ways in which one can perform tapas or austerity. So this is very important to try to do these. These are things that Prabhupada specifically mentions, and they are austerities, but they are needed austerities, important austerities. Charity is offered to the Brahmanas because they are always engaged in the higher spiritual service and have no time to earn their livelihood. So charity is another quality and it should be given to the Brahmanas. And interesting how this connects to our previous point, that how the devotee does not have time to make plans and think about how to make money, right? The devotee spends his mind and energy in how to serve the Lord. Well, then this means, obviously it'll mean that then the devotees don't have so much money. That is the Brahmanas particularly, who are very devoted to the Lord, will not have much money because they're not spending time earning this money. So therefore, charity should be given to those devotees who are continuously engaged in the service of the Lord and therefore have no time to earn their livelihood. And this is actually a very wonderful thing to do. Like, we don't often think of it, but we can also donate to devotees. In addition, we oftentimes are always donating to projects, but we can also donate to devotees who are like in a retired stage, or brahmacharis or sannyasis or vanaprasthas, and they've dedicated their life to the Lord. It's so wonderful to do that. Sometimes it's even more satisfying. I remember I was once on the Polish tour, and there was this brahmachari, and he was not very wealthy, and obviously he had no money. And so So while we were on tour, it's very austere. You're sometimes in the sun for 8-10 hours. And so, there was prasadam for everyone and ample, drinks and prasad. But still, in addition to that, just to survive, you needed to buy some drinks or some energy bars or something to keep yourself alive in the hot sun for so many hours. But he didn't have money, so he would just take the prasad that was there. And so one of the wealthy devotees there, one of the householders, he handed him $100 bill. And I still remember his face just lit up. He was so happy because he just needed it for his necessities. And that is the heart of a devotee. We cannot give up compassion. In fact, the devotee is more compassionate. And his face lit up and he could, go and buy a few things that he needed. And these were things that, new pair of shoes or something like this. So charity should be given to the brahmanas. And again, the scriptures say this. And there's no ample shortage of brahmanas in our movement. Yashas or fame should be according to Lord Chaitanya. So fame is also quality. And we are told that a devotee should never run after fame. In fact, when we read Mana Shiksha of Raghunath Das Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami describes the desire for fame to be the dancing of a prostitute in the heart. It's so despicable. But fame has its place. Fame should be according to Lord Chaitanya, who said that a man is famous when he is known as a great devotee. So a devotee can also be famous, but a devotee is famous for being a devotee of the Lord and not for material aggrandizement. And nor does a devotee aspire to become a famous devotee. That is also material desire. But fame, the point is, naturally follows the great devotee. And that fame outlives material fame. Prabhupada actually gives this example one place. He says that, Alexander the Great and these people, like, they've died and people forget about them. But he says people like Dhruva Maharaj, Parikshit Maharaj, their fame is immortal. And people keep thinking of them and they talk about them and they talk about their glories. So that is the nature of a famous person, of a truly famous person, that is the devotee of the Lord. So this is the end to the qualities in this first section that Srila Prabhupada talks about in detail. I've just given you some of the tidbits. This is so nectarian, so you can imagine how nectarian it is reading the whole thing. So please make sure to go through it and read all the purports and really sink in these qualities that Srila Prabhupada wants us to develop. That's why he's put them there in his purport. So with these qualities in mind, and with this wonderful, inspiring discussion, now we start the Chaturshloki Gita. So this is the summary of these 4 verses. What is the whole Gita? The essence of it? The essence of the entire Gita is it is one who knows Krishna's position as the supreme source of everything, becomes his pure devotee. Krishna becomes his life and soul, and he speaks and hears about Krishna constantly. So first thing, he knows Krishna to be the source of everything. Therefore, he speaks and hears about Krishna constantly. This attracts the mercy which guides the devotee back to Krishna's association. So then Krishna's mercy is there, and that mercy guides the devotee to Krishna. And finally, therefore, Krishna destroys all the impediments on the path back to him. And this is very interesting, and all of you must have experienced this in your life. When you become a devotee of the Lord, Krishna destroys the impediments on the path to Krishna. And sometimes that is by giving us misfortune. Sometimes our good fortune becomes our impediment. This is material fortune. And Krishna destroys all those impediments so that we can fully surrender unto him. And Krishna does it in every different way. This is just one example that I gave. So now together with this essence, this little summary here, let's read these 8 verses together. The first verse, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. So Krishna is the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. So as we know that this is how the chapter started, verses text to 7, text 1 through 7, and in chapter 8, Krishna is summarizing this point. The devotee knows Krishna is the source of everything. And because they know that, if you truly know that, all there is in this world is there is Krishna, then one will engage in his devotional service. And then once you engage in Krishna's service, what happens? Machita madgata prana bodhayanta parasparam kathayanta shimam nityam tushyanti charamanti cha. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So now, everyone knows that this is the Chaturshloki Gita, and how could Krishna be more clear than this? That their hearts dwell in me, their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they are Shravanam Kirtanam, continuously engaged in this process of hearing and chanting. Shravanam Kirtanam, Shravanam Kirtanam. So in this purport to text 9, Prabhupada describes, he says, their hearts and souls are constantly submerged in Krishna, and they take pleasure in discussing him with other devotees. In the preliminary stage of devotional service, they relish the transcendental pleasure from the service itself, and in the mature stage, they're actually situated in love of God. So I quoted this because this is a very important point here. This one is somewhat straightforward, right? It's also in the translation. Their hearts are submerged in Krishna, and they're always talking about him, hearing and chanting. Then in the second part, Krishna here, Prabhupada here is saying that there's two stages in devotion. In the first stage, we take pleasure, we feel Krishna's presence and happiness in the service that we perform to him. And our relationship to Krishna is very much dependent on the service that we have. In the higher stage, our relationship with Krishna is deep enough, or you could say it has developed enough, where the relationship is specifically with Krishna, not just with the service, meaning the relationship is based upon one's love for Krishna and not the specific service that one is doing. And therefore, if one's service changes, one's devotion or love for God does not become affected. And this is very important to understand practically in our practical devotional service, that many devotees become very disturbed and very distressed, and sometimes they even lose their Krishna consciousness when something goes wrong in their service to Krishna. Let's say they are in a management position and they get criticized, they get misunderstood, or maybe they're not in management and they're working under the managers, and the managers misunderstand them or criticize them. And as a result of that, they become disappointed in their spiritual life and they leave their Krishna consciousness, or their service changes and they really like the service, but they get taken out of that into another service, and therefore they'll leave Krishna consciousness for some time. But that we have to understand, that is the first stage of spiritual life. That is also our mistake if we leave Krishna consciousness because of a problem in our service. Because the service is there, but ultimately the devotee loves Krishna and is happy to do any service that Krishna wants. Ultimately, the love needs to be based upon the relationship with Krishna. The service is up to Krishna. So this is the difference between karma yoga and bhakti yoga. Karma yoga is where one is performing one's activity for Krishna, and one's relationship with Krishna is fundamentally based upon one's karma, one's activity, one's service to Krishna. On the stage of bhakti, one wants to serve Krishna. One is super enthusiastic to love and serve Krishna, and one is happy to do it in any way that Krishna wants him to do. And the external material circumstance the devotee takes as a sign from Krishna that, well, maybe Krishna, through this bad situation, is telling me that Krishna wants me to serve him in some other way. Or maybe Krishna is just testing me, or Krishna is purifying me. And therefore I'm being misunderstood. Therefore I'm being mistreated. And even Jesus Christ said this. Jesus Christ said this, that if you want to be a servant of God, if you want to be a preacher of God, then he said, then you will be misunderstood. You will be mistreated, and be prepared for that. He tells the apostles this before he gives up his body. He tells them that their mission will not be easy. They will be tormented. They will be tortured in their service to God. And that is true. That's exactly what happened. And that's what the devotees sometimes have to face. So that is the second stage, where one loves the Lord, and that is beyond any service. The devotee is happy to do any service for the Lord, and that is a very high stage. This devotional service is just like a seed, and if it is sown in the heart of a living entity, Prabhupada writes, and if he goes on hearing and chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, that seed fructifies, just as a seed of a tree fructifies with regular watering. The spiritual plant of devotional service gradually grows and grows until it penetrates the covering of the material universe and enters into the Brahma Jyoti effulgence in the spiritual sky. In the spiritual sky also, that plant grows more and more until it reaches the highest planet, which is called Goloka Vrindavan, the supreme planet of Krishna. Ultimately, the plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of Krishna and rests there. Gradually, as a plant grows fruits and flowers, that plant of devotional service also produces fruits, and the watering process in the form of chanting and hearing goes on. This plant of devotional service is fully described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It is explained there that when the complete plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, one becomes fully absorbed in love of God. Then he cannot live even for a moment without being in contact with the Supreme Lord, just as a fish cannot live without water. So then that absorption becomes so much, that relationship, the second stage that Srila Prabhupada was speaking of, becomes so much that one cannot live for a moment without being in contact with the Supreme Lord. And that is the ultimate goal, once one becomes a connoisseur of bhakti, one is only satisfied in one's devotion, one's relationship with the Lord. Everything else in one's life becomes very less important. And this is the gradual process of bhakti, that as we gradually advance, our material life becomes less and less important, and our spiritual life, our relationship with Krishna, becomes more and more important. And this is the regulative process of devotional service. I was hearing one class by Bhakti Vidyapurna Maharaj, and he was describing how this is why the enjoyment should be regulated according to the scriptures, because when one performs bhakti in household life, particularly, most of us on the call are householders, then what a person starts noticing is that if one is performing also devotional service to Krishna always, one starts noticing that the things that I do for Krishna bring me a lot of pleasure. The things that I do with my family in Krishna consciousness bring me so much pleasure. And the things that I do in material life, they are not so pleasurable. And so if something brings me more pleasure, I start doing that more. And that becomes more and more important, more and more important. So that becomes like 50%, then 60%. Material life becomes 30%. And gradually, the material part becomes, 1 or 2%, and the spiritual part becomes 99%. So, whereas initially it was the opposite way. Our material life is 6.5 days a week, and spiritual life is Sundays 2 hours. But by doing the 2 hours on Sunday, we start noticing this is the best day of my week, going to the temple. And then let me go twice a week, and then thrice a week. Or let me serve Krishna or chant 7 days a week. And like this, we become fully absorbed in love of God. Then the next verse. So Krishna is saying the quality of a devotee for us, all of us, is that their lives are fully devoted for my service. This is what he said in text 9, always chanting and glorifying me. From that, what happens? Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So Krishna is saying that if we are continuously engaged in hearing and chanting about the Lord, that Krishna will guide us. Krishna will guide our life on how we can come to him. So this is very important because the Bhagavatam also starts with this. Shrinvatam Sakatha Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana Hridyantasya Vadrani Punar Hridyantasya Vadrani Vidonoti Suhitsutam Nashtra Prayeshu Badeshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shlokir Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. So Bhagavatam says that we don't get clarity of mind before we start hearing and chanting. People say that, well, things are so unclear. Some of you have expressed questions like, how do I know to do this or to do that? Well, we won't get clarity. Clarity comes after we engage in the process of hearing and chanting. By hearing and chanting about Krishna, Krishna then gives knowledge from within the heart, and then the devotee knows, this is what I should do. So if we are feeling bewildered, that means we are not hearing and chanting enough. Because these verses in the Bhagavatam says that by the regular reading of Srimad Bhagavatam and the attendance of the Bhagavatam class, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. Similarly, here Krishna is saying that those who are continuously engaged in conversing about me and enlightening one another about me, tushyanti cha ramanti cha, to those people I give the understanding on how they can come to me. Those who are continuously serving me, I give them the knowledge on how to act. So we may wonder, how is it that the devotees know what to do? And they're so brilliant sometimes. Well, that is Krishna's inspiration, that Krishna is giving them because they are serving him. So then Krishna guides their life and he guides their desires. So Prabhupada says this, he says, a person may have a bona fide spiritual master and may be attached to a spiritual organization. But if he is still not intelligent enough to make progress, then Krishna from within gives him instructions so that he may ultimately come to him without difficulty. The qualification is that a person always engage himself in Krishna consciousness and with love and devotion render all kinds of services. He should perform some sort of work for Krishna, and that work should be with love. If a devotee is not intelligent enough to make progress on the path of self-realization, but is sincere and devoted to the activities of devotional service, the Lord gives him a chance to make progress and ultimately attain to him. So, the qualification, Prabhupada says, is that a person always engage himself in Krishna consciousness, perform some sort of work for Krishna, and that work should be with love. So that's simple enough. We all can do something for Krishna, and we can do it with love. We can all do something. We have some talent. And whatever talent we have, we can engage it in the service of the Lord. And then Krishna will give guidance from within the heart how to fulfill it. And this is especially true if we get an instruction from the spiritual master. If the spiritual master instructs us to do something, then Krishna also gives intelligence from within on how to do it. And that's why this third verse is so important, because we should have the faith that no, if that instruction is there, we can fulfill that instruction. in this verse, the word buddhi yogam is very significant. We may remember that in the second chapter in the second chapter, the Lord, instructing Arjuna, has said that he had spoken to him of many things, and that he would instruct him in the way of buddhi yoga. Now, buddhi yoga is explained. Buddhi yoga itself is action in Krishna consciousness. That is the highest intelligence. Buddhi means intelligence, and yoga means mystic activities or mystic elevation. When one tries to go back home, back to Godhead, and takes fully to Krishna consciousness in devotional service, his action is called buddhi yoga. So, very interesting point here. When one tries to go back home, back to Godhead, and takes fully to Krishna consciousness in devotional service, his action is called buddhi yoga. So, to go back home, back to Godhead requires applying our intelligence in the service of the Lord and being intelligent on how we can go back to Godhead. It's not just an automatic process that, oh, I'll do, something and, somehow just happen. One has to intentionally make an effort. And one has to engage one's intelligence in the same way that we engage our intelligence in making money or, getting in good places. We, in the same effort needs to be applied in going back home, back to Godhead. And this is why throughout this whole discussion, we're seeing how the message of the Gita is very practical. It's for us. It's not for the people, for anyone else out there that we're preaching to. It's for us, where Krishna is telling us to apply this, put it into practice, to fully surrender to Him, to engage in His, to actually dedicate our life to Krishna. That's the point. Surrender is also a very broad term, easy term, but to actually dedicate our life to Krishna. That is the message of the Gita. We have to use our mind, body, and words and our intelligence in the service of the Lord. Not simply a ritual. Krishna consciousness is not simply. We must dedicate our effort and our the most valuable resource that we have is this intelligence that we have. Engage it in the service of the Lord. Then the last verse, very wonderful verse. As though this was not enough, Krishna again emphasizes this point. He said in this verse that we just read that I give the understanding by which they can come to me. And now he's saying, Teshamevanukam partham aham jnana jamtama nashayam natva bhavasto jnana deepena bhashvata. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. So, to show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. Krishna actually destroys the darkness in our hearts. His mercy is the light. To show them special mercy, he destroys this darkness, but also the mercy itself is the lamp that destroys the darkness in our heart such that we can fully surrender to Krishna. And he shows us this path. So we don't have to worry about, very important point here, that we don't have to worry about how will we go to Krishna, how will we become a pure devotee. All we need to worry about is, am I engaged in Krishna's service or not? Am I hearing and chanting or not? If we do our part, if we are engaged in Krishna's service and hearing and chanting about the Lord, then Krishna will do his part of making sure that we are on the right path and that we come to Krishna very quickly. You see, so we don't have to worry about everything in this world, or how, am I really on the path of prema bhakti and doing raganuga bhakti, and am I in the right esoteric thing? No, Krishna is making it very clear. We serve the Lord, and all that inspiration and knowledge comes within the heart. In one place, Srila Prabhupada says, where his devotees ask that, how will we know what our swarupa is, what our eternal relationship with Krishna is? And Prabhupada says, you go on serving, and when you are ready, I will, within the heart, I will personally tell you what your Swarupa is. So that is exactly the message here, that what Prabhupada is saying. We serve the Lord, and Krishna within the heart reveals to us whatever we need to know when we are ready. The pure devotee, in this purport, Prabhupada says, does not have to worry about the material necessities of life. He need not be anxious, because when he removes the darkness from his heart, everything is provided automatically by the Supreme Lord. So this is the end of the Chatur Shloki Gita. And one point that I wanted to mention to you is that we have 27 verses that need to be memorized for the whole Gita, for the Bhakti Shastri. But this is the Gita, right? These 4 verses. So if you memorize these 4 verses, the Chatur Shloki Gita, and you know them very well, the verse and the translation, then whatever class that you ever give, whatever speech that you ever give, you'll always have enough verses. This is a great secret, actually. If you know these 4 verses, they will always be relevant in any class that you give, and you can quote them, and your audience will say, oh wow, he knows so many verses. Wow, this is such a good verse. Why? Because it's a fact. This is the entire Gita. So make sure to learn these 4 verses very nicely. And if you know these verses, then you can give a class anywhere in the world, and you can be a great scholar because you know the entire Gita. So this is these verses are meant to be memorized and repeated and used in classes. So very important. So now, after hearing this Chatur Shloki Gita, Arjuna is fully convinced. All of his doubts are dispelled. I'm sure all of you also now are fully self-realized. My heart is so hard. I read this so many times, but I didn't come to that realization. But to those who are pure devotees, who are listening, all their, well, not, I mean, all those who are listening sincerely become pure devotees. So now, after this, Arjuna tells his response, and this is his response. Arjuna Vacha Param Brahma Param Dhama Pavitram Paramam Bhavan Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adidevam Majam Vibhum Ahostvam Rishaya Sarve Devarshir Naradas Tatha Asito Devalo Vyasa Swayam Chaiva Bhavishime. Arjuna said, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are the eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest. All the great sages such as Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyasa confirm this truth about you. And now you yourself are declaring it to me. This is actually a very beautiful verse. Also, one of my favorite verses, um, like very fun to recite. Param Brahma Param Dhama Pavitram Paramam Bhavan Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adidevam Majam Vibhum. So he's saying he's Param Brahma. You are the highest Brahman. So if someone had any doubt whether or not Brahman is highest or Krishna is highest, here it is said in the Gita, Param Brahma. Krishna, you are Param Brahma, the highest Brahman. Param Dhama, you are the ultimate abode. Now this word Dhama in Sanskrit can mean abode. It can also mean form. This is a fact. You can see it in the dictionary, Sanskrit dictionary. So it also means Param Dhama, you are the ultimate form, the ultimate person. Therefore, when Prabhupada writes here person, of course, there's another word here that further emphasizes it, but it is also there. He is Krishna, is the ultimate form, the ultimate abode. Pavitram, you are the purest. Paramam Bhavan, the greatest being, the highest Bhavan, the highest absolute truth. Purusham, Purusham again means person. This Param Brahma is a person. Shashvatam, you are unborn, there's beginningless. It's not like Krishna came into being, Brahman turned into Krishna at a certain point. Shashvatam, Divyam, you are divine. Adi Devam, you are the original God, God of gods. Adi Deva. So Vishnu didn't come before you, Shiva didn't come before you. You are Adi Devam, Ajam, unborn, and you are Vibhum. You are the greatest, the, the, the collection of all great qualities. And um, the Gita is saying all the rishis, Ahustam Rishya Sarve, Narada, the greatest rishi, Devarshi Narada Satha, Devala Vyasa, they all say this. And today you are telling me this also. That was in the Chaturshloki, which verse? The first verse, 10:8. So the Gita does not leave any question as to the position of Krishna and the qualities of Krishna. So now, having said this and having heard the greatness of Krishna, Arjuna says, "O Janardhan, again, please describe in detail the mystic power of your opulences." He says this again because Krishna has already done this before. "I am never satiated in hearing about you, for the more I hear, the more I want to taste the nectar of your words." So now it's just Arjuna is just enjoying this nectar of hearing about Krishna. And he doesn't have any doubts left, but he just wants to hear more and more and more. We are, when we're reading the Gita, we're like, oh gosh, when will this finish? But that is because we don't have a taste. When Arjuna was hearing, he was hoping, could this just not go on for many lifetimes? And I could keep on hearing and hearing and hearing. So he specifically asked Krishna, please tell me of your opulences. If you are the source of everything, if you're the greatest, as I've just said, then tell me, how can I remember that you are the greatest? How can I see you and know your greatness? And it's at this point where the second part of this chapter is there, which is the long discussion of the many, many qualities of the Lord. And this is all descriptive. You can read it in your own time. So I'm just going to cover a few of them. These are ways in which we can see Krishna in this world. How the devotee, it's just like Prabhupada gives the example that when a person has a lover, then they're seeing everything, but they see their lover in everything. That verse in the Brahma Samhita, right? Premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena. So this verse is applied to Krishna, but it's true in all circumstances. When we're prema, when there's love, there's an anjana of love on the eyes. And then in our eyes, we only see the object of our love. We only see them. Just like, to give you a very practical example, a child may be a complete rascal, very, very naughty, very disruptive. Just we all know that, right? Very annoying to everyone. But when the mother sees that child, the mother's completely in love with the child, completely in love. They're just saying, wow, what a wonderful child. Because the anjana of love is there. In the same way, when we are in love with Krishna, then we will see Krishna everywhere. Everything that we see, oh, Krishna's there, Krishna's there. And so here we see these are different ways in which we can remember Krishna. Krishna describes all of his great qualities. He says, I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all beings. I am the super soul. Of the Adityas, I am Vishnu. So Adityas, the children of Aditi, meaning the demigods, I am Vishnu, Kapila. And some very interesting one. Of lights, I am the radiant sun. So we see so many suns in this world. Of lights, Krishna is the radiant sun. Of Maruts, I am Marichi. This Marichi does not refer to the sage Marichi. It refers to one of the Maruts. And the Maruts are the different gods in charge of the different affairs of this universe. So he is, I think, Marichi is the god that makes the sweet breeze, the very fragrant and sweet breeze. So these different demigods are in charge of different aspects. That the Marut is that you see the breeze here. It's the demigod that has that breeze. Among the stars, I am the moon. So many stars in the sky, but the children always cry for the moon. It's the most beautiful one. So Krishna is the best of all things. When we see the moon, we must remember Krishna. When we see the sun, we have to remember the eye of the Lord. Of the Vedas, I am the Samaveda because it's the most beautiful when recited. Of the demigods, I am Indra, the king of heaven. He's the king of the demigods, so therefore Krishna is Indra. Of the senses, I am the mind. Why the mind? Because all the senses rest in the mind. The mind is the carrier of the senses. So in some sense, it is a sense of the senses. The other senses cannot function without the mind. In living beings, I am the living force, which is consciousness. So he's the Atma. Of all the Rudras, I am Lord Shiva. Of the Yakshas and Rakshasas, I am the Lord of Wealth, Kuvera. Of the Vasus, I am the fire god, Agni. Agni is a symbol of the Lord. Agni, fire, represents the Lord. Of mountains, I am Meru, great Meru mountain. Of priests, O Arjuna, know me to be the chief, Brihaspati. Brihaspati is the priest of the demigods. Of generals, I am Kartikeya, one of the sons of Shiva. Of bodies of water, I am the ocean. We don't find anything more massive in this world than the ocean. And that represents Krishna. It's like never ending. You go on the ocean, it's just like, it's mind boggling. It's never ending. That is a spark of Krishna. Imagine how wonderful Krishna is. Of the great sages, I am Bhrigu. A lot of stories with Bhrigu and how great he is, we see, right? Bhrigu Muni was such a great sage. He felt confident to kick the chest of the Lord. That's no ordinary person can do that. That was a special pastime. So, Bhrigu. Of syllables, Krishna's Om. Of sacrifices, I'm the chanting of the holy names, Japa. So this is a very key verse. We can quote this very often. We can just know the line. Krishna says, Yagyanam Japa Yagyosmi. Right? Yagyanam Japa Yagyosmi. So people say, why should I do this chanting? Well, in the Gita it said, we must do yagya, we must do sacrifice. And yagyanam, of all the yagyas, japa, this, japa yagyosmi. Yagya asmi means I am. So Krishna is saying, I am among all the yagyas, the yagya of japa, the sacrifice of japa. And this is a sacrifice, right? Every day we have to sacrifice 2 hours of our day when we could have been, earning money, or we could have been, eating sweets. We sacrifice that time to chant the holy name of the Lord. So it is a sacrifice, but it's the best sacrifice. Krishna is saying, I am that sacrifice. So therefore, no one can then argue that chanting is not the highest sacrifice. And specifically japa, this chanting that we do. See, we have kirtan, which is congregational, and japa is this. So here, Krishna is emphasizing japa. Of immovable things, I am the Himalayas. Of all the trees, I am the banyan tree. Of the sages amongst the demigods, I am Narada. Of the Gandharvas, I am Chitratha. Among perfected beings, I am the sage Kapila, who is none other than an incarnation of the Lord. This is Kapildev. Of horses, know me to be Uchaishava, produced during the churning of the ocean of nectar. Of lordly elephants, I am Airavata. He's the carrier of Indra. Among men, I am the monarch. So why Krishna says this? Because the king does represent the Lord. Because, there's only, one person amongst millions who becomes the king. So they have some extraordinary power in them, good fortune, good karma, due to which they come in that position. And so the devotee is respecting the power of the Lord that is present or given to that person. And so even though the monarch may not be the best person, or may even be, you could say, distracted, the devotee will still offer respect though the devotee may disagree, but they will still offer the respect to that position, to that role, and to that person, because the devotee is respecting the power that the Lord has chosen to give that person. And disrespecting that is then disrespecting the Lord, because that's the Lord's power. So, so the devotee of the Lord understands that nothing happens by chance. There's a reason why Krishna has given that person a particular role, and therefore, the devotee sees the Lord's presence there, which Krishna is saying here. Among the men, Krishna is saying, "I am the monarch of weapons. I am the thunderbolt." So all the weapons are there, but there's nothing as powerful as lightning. Such an amazing point. Among cows, I am the Surabhi cow. Of causes of procreation, I am Kandarpa, the god of love. Of serpents, I am Vasuki. Of the many-hooded Nagas, I am Ananta. Among the aquatics, I am the demigod Varuna. So many pastimes with Krishna and Varuna, Lord Ramachandra and Varuna. He's a very special demigod. Of departed ancestors, I am Aryama. He's a special story regarding Aryama also. Among dispensers of law, I am Yama, the Lord of Death. Everyone gets their fair justice when they come in front of Yamaraj at the end of their life. Among the Daitya demons, I am the devoted Prahlad. So even amongst the demons, the Lord is present, as is devotee Prahlad. Even amongst the demons, there are great devotees. And amongst the demons, who will Krishna be? He is Prahlad Maharaj. He has a very special role. Amongst subduers, I am time. Very important. Amongst subduers, I am time. Everything ultimately has to surrender to time. Among beasts, I am the lion. Just see, lions are so powerful. Just seeing a picture of them, you get scared. It's like, phew. Among birds, I am Garuda. Of purifiers, I am the wind. Of wielders of the weapon, I am Rama or Parashurama. He was extraordinarily powerful. Of fishes, I am the shark. Of flowing rivers, I am the Ganges. Ganga, right? Of creations, I am the beginning and end and also the middle. Krishna is the beginning, Krishna is the middle, and Krishna is the end. So how can there be anything in this world outside of Krishna? And this is why the devotee has such deep faith in Krishna, because there's just nothing outside of Krishna. And if we are truly convinced of this, if we truly know this, then we will never, then we will serve the Lord. We are actually not truly convinced of it. Therefore, we have doubts. Therefore, we don't surrender to the Lord fully, because we think, oh, there's something other than Krishna that I need, or that will bring me happiness, or that I need to get. But everything is within the hands of the Lord. Of all sciences, I am the spiritual science of the self. We're short of time, so I'm just going to go quickly through these. And also they're simple, so you can read them in your own time. Among logicians, I am the conclusive truth. Of letters, I am the letter A, the first one. Among compound words, I am the dual compound, Rama, Krishna. It's the most beautiful Sanskrit compound. I am also inexhaustible time. Right? Time I am. Krishna says this again in chapter 11. We'll see this again. Again and again, Krishna says, I am time. Of creators, I am Brahma. I am all devouring death. I am the generating principle of all that is yet to be. Among women, I am fame, fortune, fine speech, and memory. So among women, Krishna is all of these qualities. So Krishna is very balanced, right? Krishna has pointed out good qualities in men and good qualities in women. And among women, I am intelligence. These are all feminine qualities, Prabhupada explains. Among women, I am steadfastness. Steadfastness. Among women, I am patience, Krishna says. Actually, he gives a lot of qualities for women. So Actually, Krishna mentions this to quite some extent. Of poetry, I am the Gayatri mantra. I mean, the spiritual world, you see, like, is so divine, right? It's so divine. We're so engrossed in this material world and the things and all these things. But even if we have a drop of the experience of the spiritual world, what is the material world in its comparison? I mean, just in these, this is why Prabhupada said these paintings were so important in our Krishna conscious movement, because they're windows to the spiritual world. And we can actually appreciate through all of these things that how, if we can draw them, if we can paint them, that means they exist in our mind. And if they exist in our mind, they must exist somewhere. You see? Like many philosophers have actually made this point that if something exists in your mind, you can only create it in your mind, you can only imagine it because it exists somewhere. So these spiritual planets, these spiritual vibrations like the Gayatri and things, they must be existing somewhere. This is why we can think of them. So I'll stop here. We're now out of time, and this continues on all the different ways in which Krishna is present in this world and how we can think of him in so many different ways, in so many different manifestations. Whatever wonderful thing we find in this world, whatever glorious thing we find in this world, it is all coming from Krishna. Okay, so I'll stop here. And now we have about 20 minutes for questions. I apologize that I cannot go longer today. As you know, with these vaccines, you're lucky to get an appointment. They're very, very booked. So this is what I could get, this is what we could get. So we have about 20 minutes now for your questions and comments.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for wonderful nectarian class. And these slides were so like enlightening. I'm still wondering, I'm not going to ask you this question, but I'm still wondering, after hearing all this, Duryodhan still could not accept Krishna as Krishna. I still cannot understand that part. So I feel like anybody would accept because Krishna himself is showing his opulence. But my main question is, Prabhu, Chatur Shloki Bhagavad Gita. I don't know, please forgive me for my intelligence, but I feel like, Krishna has repeated all these like in few chapters here and there, indirectly here and there. So I'm trying to understand, again, please forgive me for my limited, I'm trying to understand that how it is something very new Krishna is speaking in Chatur Shloki Bhagavad Gita, and how it is standing out, like you mentioned in the beginning, that's it, Bhagavad Gita is over here, like Krishna accept him. So I'm still trying to correlate both.
Yes, this is a very nice point. So the thing is that the Chatur Shloki Gita is nothing new, like you're saying. But Krishna has said it in a way that has summarized the essence of everything that he is saying in the entire Gita. So this is why. So it's not anything new. Just like in chapter 9, Krishna says, Machitta Madgata Prana. He, almost the same verses there in chapter 18. In chapter 9, he said, Ananya Chintayanto Mam. So many times he repeats the same message. But the point is that all the philosophy, the essence of all the philosophy is in these 4 verses. Krishna is the source of everything. Everything comes from the Lord. Therefore, always talk about the Lord, remember the Lord, serve the Lord. Therefore, if you do that, then Krishna will help you. And if we do that, then all of our darkness will go away from the heart. So that is the essence.
Yes, Prabhu, got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Go ahead.
You said that it was a very good class today. Thank you so much. You said that the devotee forgives and forgets. And I think, if I can say this about myself, I think I've gotten to a point where I've been able to find forgiveness in my heart. But I don't know that I can forget. So does that mean that I'm not forgiving fully? And am I making an offense?
Well, different situations and different things. I've heard Chandramani Maharaj actually say that the devotee forgives but does not forget. Because
Ah,
he says that the reason why he does not forget so that that doesn't happen again. On the other hand, I've also heard, you know, very pure devotees say the devotee forgives and forgets. Because once you forgive it, you won't keep it in your heart, so you'll naturally forget it. So it's you know, forgetting to the point that one doesn't it doesn't pain one's heart, but not forgetting to the point that one does that same mistake again.
mm. Thank you. That really helps. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, this is regarding 21 to 39 slokas. Lord Krishna is there everywhere and is everything. So
Yes.
why specific examples are given of this?
Mm. Yes. So Krishna says this at the end, and I didn't cover that slide. He says, what is the use of this, O Arjuna? Yad yad vibhuti mat sattvam, Srimad urjitam eva va, tattad eva gachatvam. And I'm forgetting the last line. So Krishna says, with just a spark of my splendor, I pervade the entire universe. Just a spark of his splendor, he pervades the entire universe. So he says, what is the use of this actually, Arjuna? I'm telling you all these things, but there's no end to my qualities, and there's no end to the places where we can find the Lord. So why is he then giving this list? Just to emphasize some that we can meditate upon. So Krishna says, I am the taste of water. So we all have to drink water. So every time we drink water, we can think of Krishna. It's the same thing. Everyone sees the sun. So Krishna is saying, when you see the sun, you can remember me. So this is why, just to emphasize certain aspects in which we can remember the Lord, Krishna is mentioning this. But actually, Krishna himself at the end says, there's no use for this because there's no end to my greatness.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Danvat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
So this question has been dwelling in my mind for a while, and I think when Mataji asked the first question, it sort of reminded me that. So we're thinking about Duryodhana. We're always portray Duryodhana or Dhritarashtra or Kamsa, all these demons. That they behave in a way they are always envious of Krishna. But we all know that this is all happening because of Krishna's yoga maya. So they are playing bad characters to teach us that we should not behave in that way. But that doesn't mean that we sort of downplay or sort of blaspheme them. And so how should we uh, like carry ourselves, or teach our mind, remind our mind that we should not be really thinking totally bad about them, because we're reading Bhagavad Gita with our kids also, and this comes time to time, and obviously we don't want to behave like Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra and Kamsa and all of them, but at the same time we should not be really judging them as a bad characters. So if you can enlighten something about that, that would be helpful.
Nice question. And actually, I was trying to keep the answer short, so I didn't mention this in the last one. Uh, the thing is that the asuras, the demons, are of such nature that Krishna can be standing in front of them, and they still will not surrender to Krishna. So it's not just the knowledge; it's also how we accept the knowledge, and if we're willing to accept the knowledge. You see, so like Duryodhan, he saw Krishna, show his chakra in the assembly, and he couldn't kill him. He tried so much, but in spite of all of that, he still never surrendered to Krishna, and that's because his mentality was one of an asura. So we need to understand that Krishna is that Krishna is. That Krishna is not accessible to someone just because he's standing before him. in front of them. So this Mahabharat, it was going on a cosmic level. The great asuras, they actually took birth as Duryodhana and took the human form, and the great devas, they took birth on the side of the Pandavas, the Vrishnis and the Pandavas. And so their enmity towards the Lord and the devotees was since a long time, and they were very great demons. Now the thing is that they were also pious because they're demons who saw the Lord, or maybe they're Jay and Vijay in very rare circumstance. But generally speaking, they're more like, you could say, demons, but also they've done some spiritual activities, some good activities, and therefore they had like they're also there, but they're still demons. Like many people, they say, oh, Ravan was actually a sage, and this that. That's true that ultimately he was Jay and Vijay, and so ultimately he's a devotee of the Lord. But in that birth, in that role, he is a demon. We can think badly of him. He did steal Sita. He did, cause harm to the devotees. Same thing with Duryodhana. He tormented the devotees so much. He tried to insult Draupadi in the assembly. So he was a demon. But they're also, they perform, some people have very good karma and they also have bad karma. So they also perform pious activities because they were just not any demon. They were a demon that was able to see Krishna, even though they never recognized Krishna. Yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Nice question. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Other questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for a nice session as always. Prabhuji, there is amongst, like Krishna says, amongst women, I am the intelligence, I am the fame, the fortune. So I was just wondering, like how, like at one side, women's qualities are given, and on the other side, women are also mentioned as lowest. So how do we understand this, Prabhuji? Like, or am I misunderstanding anything here?
No, women are not mentioned as lowest. There is some statement, like you're saying, that says, oh, okay, women, the statements that we find. But the thing is that that's why we see that Vedic culture and Vedic understanding was never speaking in absolutes. Like they say, the devil is in the details, right? So, which women are we speaking of? Materialistic women, yes, they are materialistic women, can be more materialistic than materialistic men. And it's, that's what the scriptures are tend to be saying at times when they're saying, you can see statements about women, that they have a tendency to possibly become more prone to materialism than materialistic men. But even that, we find such fallen materialistic men in this world. Most of the murders in this world are done by men. So in what way are women more fallen if most of the crimes is just a fact are done by men? And so, but there's certain tendencies, weaknesses that every different psychophysical nature has. And there is a, you could say, women have a nature of becoming materially very attached to their home, family, all these things. And so therefore, in previous times, historical times, the men were maybe more renounced and they would go to the forest to perform austerities, but the women would not. And so in that way, in previous times, there was that distinction. But then Krishna here balances it also. Then he's saying, no, these qualities, they are feminine qualities, and they are, I had shown the images there of the different, like Saraswati and Devi and all these. There's goddesses that personify these qualities. And Prabhupada mentions that women are very intelligent and they have fine speech. And, he also says this also in different places, if we see his full writings in completeness. So the scriptures are just warning people of different things to watch out for. different, just like we were discussing this actually recently, that there's certain qualities that the Kshatriyas have to watch out for that are bigger traps for them than the qualities of a Brahmana or of a Shudra. Like, the Kshatriya does not have to watch out for the quality of being too peaceful, because he's already passionate. They have to watch out for the quality of being too passionate and power hungry. The Brahmana has to watch out for the quality of being too much in the mode of goodness, being too peaceful, being like, just very proud of his being very peaceful, very nice, pakka, like sattva guna. So much so that you can be callous towards the needs and suffering of others. That's what the Brahmana needs to watch out for. So every person, every species have certain things that they have to watch out for. And so both men and women have different shortcomings they have to watch out for, and they also have different strengths.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, we have time for one more question. If not, that's okay.
Does anyone else have a question? If not, then you can have. Anyone else want to?
Prabhu, I have a question. If someone else wants to go, that's fine.
Yeah, someone
If
who
no one
hasn't
has it, then I'll go.
Someone else who hasn't asked?
Yeah, Hare Krishna. This is Ramdana from Next Gospel. Just this is, I think, I know, like this is this Gita happened in the Kurukshetra, right? Like in front of armies. When Krishna is speaking, does everybody is listening this one, or just only Arjuna is listening?
So I've read that a few people were listening. Few people could listen. Like Sanjay obviously was listening. Sanjay was, Vyasadeva was listening. So like the great sages, they could tune in. I'm not sure if Bhishmadev and Dronacharya were listening or not. I don't think so. I haven't read exactly somewhere where it's said. But they obviously knew all this philosophy already. But yes, a few people were listening, but not everyone.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Dandavat Pranam, Jai Srila Prabhupada. What about Barbaric? Is he was listening? He was watching, right?
Who?
Barbaric. Who is Khatu Shyamji, right? Right?
I haven't heard that. I don't know.
Oh, okay, Prabhuji. Yeah. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
I have a question regarding this charity. It is mentioned that charity should be given to Brahmanas. And I want to understand, like, what is the consequences of giving charity to like something like a non-profit organization like hospitals, and like there is something like why it is so mentioned elaborately in Bhagavad Gita that only to Brahmanas one should be giving. And what about our relatives?
Right.
Sometimes relatives go through so many tough times, and how do we understand this?
Yes. So, I mean, imagine it like this. Then you'll understand what the caliber of these Brahmanas are. I mean, I'm just imagine if you're giving charity to Srila Prabhupada. If you gave charity to Srila Prabhupada, then whatever you give to him, he'll use it perfectly. Right? Whatever is needed in this world, he'll give it perfectly. And so that's why it was said, give charity to the Brahmanas. Because obviously, if you're giving charity to the Brahmanas, you're not a Brahmana. And because the Brahmanas, they don't have money to give charity, they accept charity. And then whatever they have, they're giving away to wherever it is needed the most. So they have the vision, they have the knowledge to know where money is best applied, where it's needed most. And therefore, the Vedic principle was to give it to the Brahmanas, and the Brahmanas would then distribute it in society. And there's many examples of this where when the Brahmanas received something in excess, then they would give it to someone else who should be receiving it, that Lakshmi. So today, in our modern times, I'm using the example of Prabhupada, but we can also think of our own spiritual masters, own great personalities in this movement. We give it to them, and then they know which project to put it into. And that project could be the Bhaktivedanta Hospital on Mira Road. That project could be a temple that's coming up. That project could be a Gurukul, a school. But they know best. This is the place. So we can give directly to those projects, but we can also give to a Brahmana, and the Brahmana will give it where it's most needed.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Nice point. Nice question. Okay, so it is 12 o'clock. Maybe one last question if someone wants to, and then we will end.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I just had a question. Like, as devotee householders, I was always thinking, like, how much should we give, to all these projects or to a spiritual master? Like, it might not be like, fixed, but I just want to have an idea, like how frequently we should give, like that.
Actually, if we read the Chaitanya Bhagavata, then Lord Chaitanya in the Chaitanya Bhagavata, and you can read it, we all can read it ourselves. Lord Chaitanya Bhagavata, Lord Chaitanya says that the number one quality, the duty of a devotee householder is to give charity. So Lord Chaitanya actually says that a number one duty, and it's interesting that Lord Chaitanya says this because he doesn't say chanting the holy name or reading Bhagavatam or reading Bhagavad Gita. He says giving charity, because that's the way our existence becomes purified. Because the reality is that in household life, this is why Prabhupada, you were saying this, all the time we are engaged in earning money, and there's just no way around it. And if we're earning less money, it still takes full time. And if we are fortunate and we're earning a lot of money, it still takes full time. So it's really not possible for us to work half time. Some people can, but generally speaking, one has to work the same number of hours, but it just depends how much one earns. So if one is fortunate and they have Lakshmi, then one pleases Lord Chaitanya by giving charity. So that's why we do as much as possible. We understand that if we want to please Lord Chaitanya, if we want the mercy of the holy name, then we have to follow its instructions and we should give. And I see in the comments someone wrote that it said 50%. That's what Rupa Goswami has prescribed, and so we aspire towards that. But sometimes even 5% or 10% is very nice. But the principle is that we want to please Lord Chaitanya. One's giving charity not just to give charity, it's actually as a service to Lord Chaitanya, because that spreads the holy name. That donation that we give should be given so that the holy name gets spread all over the world.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Okay, thank you. So we'll stop at this point. Thank you for the wonderful association.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji Dantanam.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you so much.
Have this
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Danutna.